I don't have a Wikipedia page. You don't have a Wikipedia.
No, I don't.
Rod Demery has a Wikipedia page. Hey, Mr.
Yeah.
Rod, welcome back to Keel. How are you this morning, sir?
Hey, good. How are you guys?
Let me read. Rod Demery, an American author, TV host, and retired Shreveport, Louisiana homicide detective. Among other achievements, he is best known for his role as host and narrator on the TV series Murder Chose Me. You're still a busy man, I assume. How you been getting along? What's the latest?
Good. Yeah, still busy, but not as busy. Doing a lot of fishing, enjoying life a little more. Taking things a little slower now.
Rod, the nation's in turmoil with regard to policing, and we have an incident here now that is beginning to bubble up. The Tommy McLaughlin case, where 4 officers are shown on videos. You can see it on KSLA. Punching, kicking, tasing him while he's handcuffed and on the ground. Inappropriate by police? Let's start there.
Well, it's always difficult to kind of second guess what happened, what led up to whatever events. But absolutely, in the climate that we're in, anything that looks even remotely excessive is going to be scrutinized really deeply. It's really unfortunate that these things are happening. And policing, after a while you think it would evolve, but it seems to have devolved. Something like that has to be investigated, and I'm pretty confident. Actually, I'm overconfident it's going to be investigated properly.
We are going to have Shreveport City Councilwoman Lavette Fuller on in just about 45 minutes, and she had commented on this case among others, and she was, to say the least, critical of the Shreveport Police Department. Says that it is years and years of a system that has sort of evolved, that it's been police within the department, in the system, looking the other way when these things have happened. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think, specifically to Shreveport is really kind of unfair because it's a nationwide trend. And policing has always been questioned, and people that are involved in policing have been questioned. I think it's important to remember that police work involves humans, and where there are humans, there's human error. Training, the system, the way it's created, the way it's continued on is a part of life. And let's just be honest, policing has not been up front and honest anywhere. That's just because the system is bad. I'd have to admit that the police departments across the country all need some sort of reformation put in place because none of them work properly. That's just a fact.
What kind of reformation? What are we talking about? I still want them to come if I get in a wreck or somebody breaks. You know what I mean? Somebody breaks into my house.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's ridiculous to say that you should defund a police department or somehow disband a police department. That doesn't make any sense to me at all because it's just kind of silly. But when I say reformation, I mean the system, the way we police, and that's a natural occurrence. It's historically naturally occurring, and it has occurred. Seems like every generation, every 20 years, there's some sort of outcry about police and their practices and tactics that always change. And they change every 20 years. It seems like, 60s, 70s, or 60s, 80s, 90s, the 90s came in with Rodney King, OJ, and, now here we are again. People change, the way they are policed changed. I think the biggest problem with policing is that it's failed to do that. It just has to change. It has to evolve.
Mr. Rod, but you were a Shreveport cop for a while, and there's a ton of black men on the Shreveport and women on the Shreveport police force. Are you kind of saying that when you were there that the system was too big for one or a small group of people to change it? What help me out here with what is termed systemic racism?
Well, I think that it's a bigger conversation than systemic racism. I hear a lot about that, but the reality is, and what a lot of people don't understand, is that it's not necessarily systemic racism. There's systemic corruption, and bad policing. And when you see incidents such as the one that happened in Minneapolis, or even in Shreveport, you see officers of different races and colors and backgrounds. So that should ring alarms that it's not necessarily a racist thing. Policing is about classism and power. It's about people who are in positions of people who have no power. When those people assimilate in people that are of other races, ethnicities, you're still going to have the same problem. So it's not necessarily just that, and certainly I'm not to say that it doesn't exist or it hasn't existed or I haven't seen systemic racism, but it's a bigger problem. It's a much bigger problem than racism, and I think people kind of shortchange it by cutting it off as, this is a racist problem. You can't explain the diversity in police departments.
So my question is, when you have a police officer who you have incidents against, multiple incidents, we keep hiring them back because you guys have these police bill of rights. Does that need to be revamped too? Do we need to make it easier to get rid of bad cops?
And sort of dovetail with that, are police unions partially to blame also?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's real simple. If a police officer has a pattern of abuse, I think police administrators need to be less hesitant in firing them. I think there is definitely a climate where you have different officers bill of rights, civil service, whatever you have in place or mechanisms to give that officer due process. I think that should still be in place, but I still think you should take action against an officer, especially if they have numerous complaints. The problem is not necessarily that the system being bad. It's the people inside the system and how we administer the justice inside the system or the rules or regulations or what have you. No question that policing is a bad, dirty place to be, and it's always been that way. The only thing in place to kind of help people or address that are the people in charge of policing, and they have to change their patterns and practices and actually make something happen, or you're going to have this happen again and again and again.
Talking to Rod Demery, a retired Shreveport police officer now in Atlanta, had his own TV show doing all kinds of great stuff, including fishing. Wish I was with you.
Including fishing.
Rod, let me go here with you because you know Bishop Larry Brandon, correct?
I do. Good man.
Bishop Larry Brandon drives with his wallet on his dash because he drives while black, and says to me, it doesn't matter if the officer is black, white, Asian, Hispanic. He knows as a black man, he can't reach in his glove box. He can't reach in his pants for his wallet. So he just drives with it on the dash. What do we have to do to change that?
Well, that's taken a lot of change, and it's going to take a lot of change. The reality is, Aaron, is that it exists, and for people to deny that type of thing exists, it actually does exist. You would think that we would be in a place where it doesn't, but it does. I mean, I say all the time, I've been a black man for a very, very long time. I've been stopped by police. I've been harassed by police, actually. The attitude changes after the conversation begins, but it's unfortunate. It happens. How we change that is we have to change the way we police. But I think it's important to remember that it's not just a matter of a white police officer. You can have a white police officer and a black police officer, an Asian police officer, a Latino police officer, and get the same result.
Mm-hmm.
And that reality is really shortchanged, because if you got a minute, I'll try to explain it a little better.
Yeah, but it seems like they come to the scene with the mentality that if it's a black subject, they're bad.
Well, yeah, and there's a reason for that.
Okay.
The reason for that is that the criminal justice system has been biased towards black communities for a very long time, and there's a reason for that. It started off as a racist system, but as it evolved or devolved, you start to integrate different types of people, and not only people inside the system, but administrators inside the system. That's why you can have a black police chief and black police officers in charge and still have these problems, because the black community is not suffering from over policing; they're suffering from under policing. The real issues are you have crime that is rampant in a black community and violence that's rampant in the black community because there's police neglect. The reason there's police neglect is because they just simply don't care or don't want to care or too hard to police. You can have officers in a neighborhood; those officers aren't present when it comes to equal enforcement and protection. The reality is you have about maybe an 18% of black homicides being solved. You have a large percent of people that are wrongfully convicted, and there's sort of this withdrawal from that community. So naturally, there's a bunch of crime occurring in that community. So police have more contact in that community. The more they contact people, the more likely there's going to be some sort of incident. It has absolutely nothing to do with the race of the officer, because you can have an officer that's white or black and still hold those same attitudes. For whatever reason, when police officers get into a police department, they obtain that group think. This person is bad, that person is bad. Everyone's going to have their bias. The problem is when you practice them upon the community. So when the black community has an outcry of being abused, it's because they actually feel abused. It's the numbers are there and the stats are there. It's a reality. So there's a disconnect with policing. What policing needs to do is to police everyone equally.
Rod,
For whatever reason, it won't get there.
Rod, let me ask you this, and if the police chief from Minneapolis calls you, the police chief from Shreveport calls you and says, "Give me 3 constructive things I could do to make things better," what would be the 3 things on your list?
The first one is to show their police, that they're supposed to police equally. The second is not tolerate anything that resembles them not doing so. The third thing would be a seriousness of purpose. There absolutely has to be a seriousness of purpose, whether that person you're in contact with is black, white, gay, straight, other. As a police officer, you are not allowed to have an opinion. And for whatever reason, people think they have opinions. They like to spew their political views. They like to talk about what they believe and what they don't believe. Social media has taken on a whole new form where a police officer can express his political views or her political views and not expect a huge backlash. You can't do that. It's almost tyranny. You got to quell that. You got to stop it. You got to hold it in and police equally, because you're dealing with humans and you're dealing with people who rely on you. If you have an extraordinary amount or an inordinate amount of black murder against black people, it seems even worse when a black police or when a police officer kills a black person, because the people you're supposed to run to and be protected by are actually committing the atrocity. And I don't think there's any police officer on earth that doesn't think what happened in Minneapolis was just horrible.
Absolutely.
The level of politics and the level of opinion and the level of I guess social or cultural differences is something that police officers or anybody that's in a position to hold the life or the liberty of somebody else to express. It shouldn't be allowed. And instead of reducing that, you see more of it nowadays.